Hello everyone, my name is TheMadScorpyon and welcome to the Strand portion of the Prismatic element breakdowns. In this video I will of course cover all the abilities and aspects that are going to be available to you on the Strand element, as well as its subclass verbs and some of the effects you can expect to see, and the exotics you can hopefully use to pair to better make use of your Strand elements. Starting off with the subclass verbs you can hope to encounter when running Strand, the first is Severing. The target's connection to the world around them are cut, and their outgoing damage is significantly reduced. Severing targets unwind them into a tangle when defeated. And to explain what a tangle is very quickly, a knot of strand matter swirling with potential, tangles can be shot and destroyed, or picked up and thrown, dealing damage. Debuffed targets with Strand will always unwind into a tangle, but they do have a cooldown, so if they do not become a tangle, it's because the timer is still going. From that point, there is Unraveling as well. The target is permeated with destructive strand matter, and they take additional damage. They create unraveled projectiles that will seek out nearby targets. They act a lot like Shiva strands off of Outbreak Perfective, if you've seen that. Unravel rounds from your strand weapons will pierce barrier champions, and as always, will unveil into a tangle. From there is also Woven Mail, which is probably the most significant endgame one. Your body is encased in protective mesh of tightly woven strand matter, greatly reducing any incoming non-precision damage, specifically for the Crucible crowd. Then, lastly, there is Suspension, which is the most useful in an endgame. The target is immobilized with a web of strand matter, lifting them into the air. While suspended, guardians are unable to move freely. Combatants are unable to move or fire their weapon, and unstoppable champions are stunned. And as always, suspended targets will unwind into tangles. From that point, that is pretty much everything, as the tangle itself is the strand pickup. It doesn't exactly return any energy, but there is ways to make it more beneficial with a variety of strand fragments. Getting into the Strand abilities for the Hunter, their super is the one available to them. Now, I will be honest, this is going to be a lot like Stasis, where they don't have that many aspects and options available, so it will likely be some of the ones you recognize. The super is the Silk Strike, weaving a vicious rope dart to tear through enemies. Your left trigger attack, or your light attack, is going to basically be a simple one-way hit, and the heavy attack being a area of effect damage, less in total damage, but able to take out multiple enemies. And of course, you can use grapple to move forward while in Silk Strike, as it is probably the most effective way to grapple in the game. From that point, they will have access to all of the class abilities as always, including the marksman, or including the acrobatics dodge, and they do have the melee of the threaded spike, throwing a rope dart that bounces between targets, damaging and severing. The dart will return to you once it's done, returning melee energy for each target hit, and if you perfectly time it and catch it, it will increase the amount of returned energy. They will also have the grapple ability as always, which allows you to either grapple melee towards a target and deal some heavy damage, or otherwise just traverse the area freely. If you grapple to a tangle, it will immediately recharge your attacks, in addition to unraveling anything you do manage to hit with the grapple. From there, the aspect available is the weird one that I did not expect in the Threaded Spectre, which is the one that I think is at the bottom of the useful tier list, mostly for Strand. Activating your class ability leaves behind a decoy woven from strand matter that draws attention of nearby combatants. After taking significant damage, or when combatants approach, the decoy detonates and causes Threadlings to spawn, which that is the last bit of debuffs as well. The Threadling is basically just a creation that will seek out and attack targets, and it is made from a variety of Strand abilities. Now, getting into armor, unfortunately, as Strand is the most recent released damage type, it doesn't have many elements that is allowed for it, or many exotics that can specifically afflict Strand on its own. The only one for Hunters is the one that I will never try to pronounce because I sound like an idiot, but Saitaranchi's Facade is the best I can go for. Basically, you gain Woven Mail anytime you grapple, and since you still have access to your grapple with Prismatic, it means that this is one of the few viable options that is, of course, subclass relevant if you want to run Strand, but from that point, there isn't much more to it. It is a very simple exotic. The neutral game exotics are going to be lots of the regular recommendations, things like Foe Tracers, Assassin's Cowl, the usual neutral games, Star Eater Scales. I don't think Amphibious Spathe works for the rope dart. It mainly just refers to throwing knives, and of course Dragon Shadow, and things like maybe even Mothkeeper's Wraps if you want options. That is not subclass specific. However, that is pretty much the full extent of things I can recommend. Again, neutral game, 6 Coyote, Frosties, anything that doesn't require specifically Strand you can definitely make use of it. And moving on to our Crab Claw Titan Supers. It is basically the same thing from everything else. The limited options they have access to. The super being Blade Fury, where you just create 2 woven blades from strand matter. Its left trigger is a basic attack that is just a claw attack, severing and dealing bonus damage to suspended targets, with rapidly increasing damage attack speed when you create heavy attacks as well. The heavy attack being an upward lash that creates suspending projectiles that will suspend and hit anything in its path. From there as well, their melee is the basic Frenzied Blade, which is very similar to the super ability. Will sever any targets it hits, and has 3 melee charges, which is pretty significant in comparison. And the melee they have access to is the Shackle Grenade, as suspension is a little bit more honed in with Titans. A thrown projectile that will both release additional submunitions, suspending targets, and, of course, creating additional submunitions like I just mentioned. The aspect they will have access to is Strenger's Lash, which is the original Strand use. Basically, activating your class ability will create a ripple of suspending seekers that will, of course, suspend anything and damage any target it hits. From that point, the exotics that they have access to is, once again, quite limited, as there's only one real exotic that is focused towards Strand, and that is a Buoyant Leap, where it buffs Strenger's Lash, it spawns additional projectiles, they track more aggressively, and you gain woven mail anytime you suspend a target. So this is very useful for just locking down more of the field. However, it is quite in a nerf state after its very much meta status in the early days of Lightfall. From that point, it is the same usual, again, neutral game exotics that I would recommend. Heart of Inmost Light for more ability, energy, Crest of Alpalupi for some emergency healing, Armamentarium if you want additional shackle grenades. However, most of the other things like Peregrine Greaves, I don't believe this counts for Frenzied Blade. And then from that point, it is again the usual aspects, maybe Precious Scars if you want to go out full healing. And from that point, though, Worm Gods because there is lots of melee charges. But that is about it for our Titan friends. And for our Strand Weaver Warlocks, of course, again, it is the one super they have access to in the form of Needle Storm, where you call upon a hail of deadly woven needles that after embedding in targets and detonating will turn into Threadlings. Any Threadlings that have not been destroyed will return to you and perch that will again return to the battlefield after seeking a new target. From that point, there is the melee they have access to, the Arcane Needle, which is a deadly woven projectile that will track and unravel targets on hit, gain ability, or you have additional charges if you want to chain the uses. Then you also have access to the Threadling Grenade, which at any point can create Threadlings on the impact point. The aspect they have access to is the Weaver's Call, which basically makes it so that they have a benefit to everything else. You cast your Rift to create Threadlings, which makes it so that the Strand, as much as Strand Warlock was already a creator of Threadlings more so than others, it keeps its title of Threadling Maker. From that point, though, again, there is only really one exotic Strand-wise that can really benefit Strand, and that is Swarmers, which even more so enhances the ability to spawn Threadlings from destroying tangles, spawning Threadlings, and Threadlings unraveling anything they hit. From that point, though, I'm going to sound like a broken record. It is the usual neutral game exotics that I would recommend. I have Another World for more ability energy, Verity's Brow in case you want specifically more Threadling grenades, and I can go on and on. I have a unique build that takes advantage of Necrotic Grips with Arcane Needle. That is an option. However, I know most people won't take it. Same with the Karnstein. A ranged melee and healing from a distance is definitely a good pick. But from there, again, broken record, it is the usual things I would recommend. Battle Harmony if you want to Strand synergize. Traverse steps if you want a bit of a movement speed buff. Boots the Assembler if you want more healing from your basic Rift for your allies as well. But from that, it is that. Now, I want to apologize that I did miss out on my stasis video, the weapons that you could use to better buff your stasis, so I will kind of go more than once and just kind of call it the darkness weapons section. So starting off with the kinetics, the usual Traveler's Chosen, getting kills creates stacks, and consuming those stacks create energy. Very solid if you just want to boost your output of abilities and its creation. From there, for stasis, I would actually recommend both of these, both Cryosthesia and Agriceptor. With the Catalyst, Cryosthesia is actually in a nifty point, and with recent buffs, is actually a lot better than it was when it was initially released. So I would actually recommend this one if you're looking to have an option to freeze everything. From that point as well, Agriceptor also does more significant action, considering its catalyst makes it so that you can slow and freeze targets with its natural fire. Then again, it does consume your super energy, but it seems to be dime a dozen and really useful regardless. From there, though, it does kind of descend from there. There is Quicksilver Storm, which is a Strand projectile weapon once you unlock the catalyst. It is probably one of the best auto rifles in the game. I think it was recently tweaked a little bit, so it wasn't so potent, but at the same time, I think it is still high up on the tier list. But from there, final warning, of course, if you want to have options for Strand, it does, I believe, unravel some targets as well as just being auto-tracking. It has some nifty perks to it, although there is a bit of a learning curve to making it better than its natural form, if I recall. And there is Conditional Finality, which its first shot can freeze anything you shoot, which always is handy for stopping unstoppables, as well as just keeping anything you're shooting at contained if you need it to stop attacking for a moment. From there is actually many perks that you can choose between Strand. Verglass Curve, while being a bit of a low damage dealer, is definitely nifty for creating stasis crystals if you wish to just fill the field with stasis. From there, Wicked Implement is great at freezing single targets and keeping the shot on field. It may not have total damage, but it is great at creating crystals and just making sure that a single target, that if it doesn't die in 2 shots, will freeze within 5. From there as well, the Navigator is classic for granting Woven Mail, as well as unraveling any targets you hit, and being able to traverse the battlefield freely with a self-made grapple point using its catalyst. As well, Wishkeeper is a recent addition, which is basically Hierarchy of Needs, but green flavored, able to create a trap field anarchy style that will suspend anything that walks into it, and of course being more modular, it can spec out 4 types of gameplay if you wish to specialize a little bit. Now, unfortunately, from that point, there hasn't been any added real Strand-heavy options that we can look forward to, but there has been 2 bits of stasis, the first being Salvation's Grip, which was recently buffed, which is basically a crystal maker that with its lower basic shot is a crystal breaker. Really nifty for you stasis folks that are looking to create a field of ice. But from that point as well, the only other one is Winterbite, which is on paper good, but at the same time, it had many issues with self-detonation hurting the wielder. Really good at sending out a just basic sentient projectile that can freeze anything in its way, and does hit harder depending on whether or not you have ammo, and does empower with stasis with slow. But from that point, that is pretty much all it is, as it is just a glaive that has a little bit of slowing and a automated projectile. But from that point, that is literally all I can recommend that is either stasis or ability tuning. I could always, of course, recommend Bad Juju, but Bad Juju is a basic, just ability super regen. And as always, there is things like Monte Carlo for melee if you want to buff your Arcane Needle. But, you know, those are the options that you have present for you. Now, again, I am still sick. I apologize if I sound weird or if this has turned you all away just for a little bit. Hopefully I'll get over it soon. But from that point, I do appreciate watching to the end of the video, and as well, this is the last video covering this topic, at least in this string of videos. I have now officially covered all 5 elements, so you can hopefully have a better edge against your enemies when you get to wield Prismatic and combine all 5 of these elements together. With that, my name is TheMadScorpyon. I will see you in the next video.